So again, good evening. John Wesley, Superintendent, Central City Schools. This is Laura Sauber, our treasurer. Welcome back. We had several community forums last year. Got a lot of positive feedback about having the opportunity to share district financial factual information, and we want to continue to have some of these meetings ongoing. And so we chose to start in July. So we have this meeting tonight, and I will share with you some additional meeting opportunities as we move forward. So just want to say good evening. Thanks for being here. We appreciate those that are here in attendance. I would also like to take a few minutes to just recognize a few folks in the audience. First, with our school board, Megan Sparks is back here in the back, is here. Dr. Rohr is with us. And I believe I saw John Dahl come in. There's Mr. Dahl. And I think I've covered all the board members that are here. Also have a few members of our central office team that are here tonight to help answer some questions towards the end. Chuck Kogel is our Director of Business Operations. Also have Shannon Morgan here up front, who's helping with the technology. He's our Director of Technology. Sarah Swan in the back is our Community Relations expert for the district. We appreciate her help. And Becky Furby is our Director of Special Education. So as you can imagine, July is a very busy time of the year. I don't know that our work ever really slows down. We have several folks out on vacation this week, and that's great because they deserve that time, and they should be off. So we are ready to go with introductions, and we'll get started with our presentation. So every time we've had this presentation, we've talked a little bit about just this disclaimer. And if you've been to some of these presentations, you're going to see some of the same slides over and over a little bit. Some changes to some of the slides, but this is one that's been very consistent. You know, tonight, our goal is just to provide you as much factual information about the district, about our district finances, and what we plan to do as we move forward as a district. And so, again, it's just a disclaimer that we are really talking about our district, factual information about our district. Tonight's presentation is looking at these 5 areas in our presentation tonight. Since the levies in November and March ballots were rejected by voters, we have made reductions and continue to discuss how to move forward as a district. With the way schools are funded in Ohio, the need for additional funding doesn't go away. There's still a need for the district to figure out how to bring in additional revenue, even though we've made reductions for the 24-25 school year. The Central Board of Education, and I think this is key for people to understand, has not approved a resolution to place a ballot back on the levy at this time. This is still being discussed. We're having these conversations with the board during our work sessions and during regular meetings, and that decision has not been made. And that's one of the reasons why we'll have some of these community forums to be able to share and provide some information across the district. The community meetings we held last winter and spring let us know some of the community's questions and concerns regarding our school district and our school finances. We are proud of the community's support of our schools, and we acknowledge this past year has been a difficult year really for everybody with inflation and the property tax reappraisal. So we understand that, and we understand that need or that concern across the community. We want to continue to be collaborative. We want to continue to be transparent and communicate with all of you as we look forward and really trying to address the needs of the district. We have 2 community forums and several informal events planned. Most of them are starting, or a lot of them are starting this week, starting tonight. We have some informal meetings coming up that I'll share a little more information later on in the presentation. But the purpose is to look at reasons why schools can't give up on asking for additional money or levies for our district, and how tonight we want to share with you possibilities for future funding and looking at the impact of our reductions and on our additional educational programs and how we plan to move forward. So if you're new to us, you'll know that we'll pass the baton back and forth a little bit. So now we'll turn it over to Laura Sauber to talk a little bit about our financial information.
Thank you, Mr. Wesley. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. I want to kind of give just a little bit of a current financial overview on where, a little bit about school funding and a little bit about where we're at today. School Funding 101, this is, Mr. Westney mentioned some of this you've seen before. This is something that never really changes in terms of how we're funding. So 77% of our operating revenue comes from voted levies or property taxes, and that is a major source of school funding for most districts in Ohio. It's state funding and local taxes are how schools generate their revenue. These revenue are used to support the day-to-day operating costs of the district. What those operating costs are for things like the teachers in the classrooms and classroom supplies, our buses on the road, all the repairs to those buses, our utilities, our custodial supplies. Those are all examples of what operating expenses are. And all of those things are paid for by these two sources of revenue, state funding and the tax revenue. State law, House Bill 920, has been in place since 1976, and that is in place, or what that law does is it basically freezes the amount of revenue that we receive from the voted levies. Inside millage is a little bit different, that's unvoted, and we can talk a little bit about that here coming up, but as far as all the voted levies, which is the majority of our tax revenue, that dollar amount is sort of frozen in time if you think of it that way. So as our property value goes up, and I'm getting ahead of myself here because that's on the next slide, as property value goes up, the effective rate of those voted levies reduces, making it to where the district receives the same amount of money. So we don't get the inflationary growth that you might see in other sources. Keeping up with those rising costs is a challenge, and that's one of the reasons that districts continue to go back on the ballot all the time. I mentioned the inside millage piece, so every taxpayer is taxed 10 mills first and foremost, and that's legislation. That's nothing that schools did across the state of Ohio. That is just a part of the property tax system in Ohio. Those 10 mills are divvied up between the schools and the townships and the cities, and you always pay a full 10 mills on your property value, whatever your property value does. And so if your value goes up, that 10 mills increases with that rise in property value. If property values go down, which we haven't seen in a very long time, it will go down as well. But that's only the inside millage. So in May of 2024, we submitted to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce a revised 5-year forecast. We do that twice a year. We submit in November for an initial forecast for the school year, and then again in May, we submit a revision. And the numbers are small here for you to see, but just to kind of take a look at the red circle and the red box, we are anticipating to deficit spend next year by close to $4 million. And we've made changes to the financial projections based on the things that we've done over the last couple of months since the March levy failed. For one thing, we have implemented a phased reduction plan. So all of the positions that Mr. Westney is going to talk about here in a little bit, he'll talk about that. The savings from those reduced positions are all factored into these numbers. We also had negotiations with our teachers union, and Mr. Westney is going to touch on that, I believe, as well. So I'm going to wait so that we're not doubling up on what we're talking about. But we have made revisions to these numbers based on the things that have happened since the spring. And we're still projecting that we're going to be deficit spending not quite as much over the next couple of years, but that was the purpose of putting those reductions in place. So this is over a historical look at the cash reserve balance that we, the blue line, so we are the bottom blue line, as a school district, have compared to districts that are in Montgomery County. That is the red line, so that's the top line. And then the state as a whole, so all 612 or 605 or however many that is, school districts in Ohio, that's the green line. So this is a percentage of cash carryover balance to total budget. And so I think this is important because one of the messages that Mr. Wesley and I heard continuously over the last year is that, well, you have all this money sitting in the bank, and we do have a reserve. School districts have to have a reserve. If we get to where we don't have a reserve, the state comes in and they're going to talk to us and they're going to say, how are you going to fix that? So a reserve balance is important. What I wanted to just explain with this particular visual is that, yes, we have money in the bank, but we're well below, from a percentage standpoint, what the Montgomery County school districts are and what the state as a whole is as well.
So looking at some of our funding challenges and impacts, this section of our presentation really is going to highlight some of our funding challenges, some of our cost savings measures that we have in place, and the impact of a funding shortage. So as Mrs. Salvers mentioned, state law freezes the amount of revenue schools districts receive from voted millage, which makes it difficult to keep up with rising your standard inflationary costs and the cost of doing business throughout the district. The next few slides, we're going to talk about our operating expenses, as well as some of our cost savings measures that we have put in place and how that's going to impact us, especially in the classroom and our teaching and learning for next school year. Looking at our district expenses, Centerville Schools, and I think it's sometimes it's hard for people to understand, is a really large district. We have nearly 8,400 students. Our enrollment count from last October was 8,382 students. With about 1,100 employees in our buildings every day of the school year. Many more of our community folks attend our events outside the school day, and so it's a big operation here in our community. Like any large operation, it costs money to keep our schools up and running and operating. We need staff for our schools that are appropriately trained and to keep and manage reasonable class sizes. It's important for us to be able to train and keep teachers trained for the jobs that they need to do. We have to buy curriculum materials and classroom supplies. We support students' social, emotional well-being. That includes providing school counselors, working with our nurses and school psychologists, our principals, as well as our school resource officers. We offer college and career pathways. We talk a lot about our career education programming across the district. Programs like that gives our students the opportunity to explore a variety of career opportunities that gives them the opportunity to learn what they want to do as they move forward. Our schools are well known for going above and beyond the state minimum requirements, which makes this a great district for our students and for our community. We have to purchase supplies like you think sometimes you don't think about school, like you have to think about our operating supplies like bus fuel, toilet paper and paper towels, copier machines, paper, all those things with inflation that you have also have realized those prices have gone up, and we continue to have to find ways to provide that, provide those products and services. As we are dealing with aging facilities and infrastructure, we've talked a lot about the age of our facilities. Most average age of our facilities is 60 years old. MAGSI, we've talked about a lot, it's 100 years old. At some point as a community, we got to find a way to come together and look long-term and how we're going to address the needs of our facilities. Finally, we've mentioned our funding remains relatively flat from year to year, but additional requirements from the state are added to our plate each and every year, making some of those unfunded mandates really a challenge for us to be able to keep up with some of those expenses throughout the district. Some cost savings measures we've shared. If you've watched some of our board meetings, you will know that we've shared a lot of this information about a reduction. After the November 2023 levy for more funding was rejected, we made some immediate reductions. Some of those immediate reductions were put in place, such as limiting new hires at the time, looking at minimizing overtime costs throughout the district, and also cutting field trips unless they were necessary based upon the program if it was based upon a curricular need or whatever it might be from that standpoint. The school board approved a phased reduction plan back in January. Since the March levy failed, Both of those reduction plans were put in place. This slide will show you the number of teaching and support staff positions that we planned or have planned or reducing for next year. You can see the changes in each of these phases. Originally, we took this plan to the board. It was about 41 total positions. We knew that was going to change throughout the year. The springtime was probably one of the most busiest times of the school year for the administration. Looking at, when you're in the springtime, you're trying to close out school year, planning for a new school year to start in the following year, looking at staffing needs, trying to hire staff, and we knew once the retirements came in, those numbers would actually change. And you can see kind of where we have landed over the last few months is 48 total positions, 17 teaching positions, and 31 classified staff with that. We did not cut any administrators. There was no cuts made, although we did cut administrative support staff throughout the district. We've addressed this criticism before and want to point out that Centerville's administration, each administrator serves about nearly 100 more students per the state average. And so we ask our administrators to take on a lot of responsibility, and they take on a lot of work, and they actually work with about 100 more kids on the state average than usual. We are anticipating some turnover in our administrative ranks. Something else that we've taken into consideration is that we know that is probably coming in the future, and so we did not make any changes with administration. So losing 48 staff members across the district will have an impact on our services. From our school resource or from our school office response times to the amount of support we can provide to the classroom. So you can also see the anticipated savings that we have on this slide. It's about $3.5 million for the general fund. So we talked about $3.5 million in reductions. This includes other cost savings, additions, not just our personnel reductions, but we also looked at including increasing school fees and pay to participate fees, as well as building and athletic field rentals. With 48 staff positions that will be reduced, we're not really going to feel the impact of those changes until August and September, once the school year starts. You have to remember most of those positions, although we did have a few positions that we didn't hire back, some of those early retirements in December and January, we didn't hire staff back, but we will feel the burden, if you will, of those reductions when the school year starts with that many staff reductions. So we're just going to have to work harder, do the best we can to continue to provide the best services we can possibly provide. Some additional cost savings measures throughout the spring. I think it's important to know that the district leaders and the leaders of the Centerville Classroom Teachers Association worked diligently to agree to a new 2-year contract, which was approved by the board the very last week of May. It was really late into the school year. Discussions that were taking place during negotiations are confidential. We're now allowed to kind of talk a little bit about some of that conversation, but there will be no increase to the base salary for all district employees for the next 2 years. It was a big ask to work with our Teachers Association with that, and I appreciate their support in working with the district as we try to figure out how we generate additional revenue for the district. Employees will receive a non-recurring stipend. It'll max out as $1,000, so it's a little bit of something for our staff, but that will not be added to the base. It will not compound year after year after year like most of our raises have been in the past. Professional development days were also added into next year's calendar to help provide teacher training opportunities while reducing the need for substitutes. That was one of the issues that the administration had going into negotiation. We wanted to find a way to reduce substitute costs, but yet find ways to provide quality training for our staff. This impacted the 2024-25 school year, the calendar specifically, which was communicated to the families once the board approved the updated calendar in June. So I think it's just important to share that. That was one of our strategies, and going into negotiations, we felt like it was important to try to save some money on substitute costs, but more importantly, have an opportunity to have professional training days for our staff within the school calendar. The district also uses several ongoing measures to save money. I think this is one of the secrets that we as administrators forget about a little bit, and we need to continue to share. The district has been part of the Southwest Ohio Educational Purchasing Council for years. That purchasing council allows us to work with other government agencies, specifically school districts, to pool resources, to be able to buy materials, services, and goods for districts at a much better cost and price. So we're continuing to work with purchasing co-ops for better deals. We're looking at long-term cost savings through energy saving or energy updates, checking prices from different vendors, looking for grant opportunities, trying to take advantage of some of the grants that are out there. We do sell some of our unused equipment that does provide a little bit of return back to our general fund. And we have a self-insuring employee health insurance plan as well as a workers' compensation. I would just add this spring, as I mentioned, it's a hectic time of the year. We were able to work with the Southwest EPC to be able to look at our electric costs. That was a big thing for us. We had a contract to the EPC. We had a low electric rate. We actually was able to get a better rate than the Miami Valley Council rate that was been well advertised, where a lot of the different government agencies got together and was able to get a lower rate. And I'm proud to say through our work with the EPC, we actually got a better rate than the Miami Valley Cable Council. So the impact on reductions. Reductions obviously impact our mission. Our mission to empower, challenge, and support every learner to grow every day. Challenges that we're facing, relatively flat funding, as Laura talked about tonight, rising operation costs, increasing need for counseling, behavioral, mental health support for our students so they can be ready in the classroom and ready to learn. Potential for increased enrollment due to new construction. A lot of new construction opportunities are taking place throughout our community, and we have to be well prepared for that. We've talked about our facilities and our infrastructure and continuous need for updates with technology to meet the needs of the 21st century learners. Impact of educational cuts, impact on educational quality and student outcomes. Obviously, when you're cutting 48 staff, we're looking at larger class sizes by reducing those teaching positions and programs. Reductions in support staff that will impact teaching planning, preparation, and building support. We're also working with our transportation department to look at fewer bus stops, trying to look at less bus routes for next year, and creating larger collection points for students. So we're going to ask neighborhood students to walk a little bit farther next year to get to those collection points to ride the bus. And because of where we are, we don't have the funding to really implement some of the strategic plans and goals that we've have outlined over the last year or two in moving forward. So looking at some funding options, this section is going to highlight why districts must return to the ballot for potential timelines. We're looking at timelines for this district and levy options. We made some significant progress to protect our budget. We talked about saving $3.5 million through the staffing reductions and fee increases and working with our teachers union on the 0% increase in the base for the next 2 years. Additional cuts to the budget would have a major impact on our ability to achieve our mission of empowering, challenging our students. If you've been paying attention and keeping up with some of the district communication, we started talking about reductions back in January. One of the things that we talked about specifically was trying to protect the classroom the best we could. And we really tried to do that looking at other areas outside of the classroom to protect it where we could and where we can. After the two failed levy attempts, why are we even talking about a return to the ballot? The bottom line is, with the way schools are funded in Ohio, specifically the way San Jose schools are funded, there is a need for additional funding. That need for additional funding just doesn't go away. It's not going to just disappear. Just because we cut $3.5 million doesn't mean we're out of the woods for additional revenue in the future. School districts need money to maintain their operations that we talked about. Voter levies are a main source of funding for most districts in Ohio. In addition to the state classifies Centerville as a high wealth district, which means we receive less state funding. This chart here shows you the amount of Centerville receives from state funding formula, plus rollback and STED reimbursements. We actually receive about $1,700 per student from the state foundation funding formula. The remaining amount comes from the rollback homestead exemptions. Our state funding has stayed about the same. I don't think people realize this, for about the last 15 years. So it's relatively same, even though the costs have gone up and the state keeps adding new requirements for our schools. Because of this, we have to rely on our local property tax to make up the majority of our revenue as we move forward. So why the return to the ballot? So our revenue, as we talked about, remains relatively flat. If we don't return to the ballot in November, we would not receive additional funds in the calendar year of 2025. And I think that's important for our community to know and understand. This means we'd be faced with trying to save additional money wherever we can, as well as coming up with additional reductions for the board to review and to look at and approve. How would more reductions affect our families and our broader community? Obviously, when you're making staff reductions, we are looking at larger class sizes at all levels of our operation, reductions in the types of programs that we can offer. I think it's important that you as the community understands that cuts in the past have included cuts for fine arts programs, world language classes, career education programs, or career education options that we have, electives that help students be prepared for life after high school, reductions for athletics. We would have to look at specifically the number of teams, extracurricular offerings, and more. So the question for our community is, do we want to continue to offer a comprehensive, above average education experience for our children, or do we just want to continue to offer state minimums, or getting to the point where we just offer state minimum programming and courses for our students? The other question is when to return. So this slide shows some of the considerations when looking at when to return to the ballot, whether it's November 2024 or in May of 2025. We have discussed several factors with regards to timing, such as the timing with the implementation of our strategic plan goals, the type of amount of levy to go back and ask for. Also to look at how the election timing affects staff recruitment is a big concern for us, and planning for more reductions and looking at what the voter turnout is going to be for both November and in May. The sooner we can secure funding, the sooner we can better prepare and look at long-term future initiatives. And so we want our community to be involved. That's why we are having these meetings, and we want you to be involved in how we move the district forward to address some of our concerns, not only from a funding, but also looking at our facilities in the future. So a little bit of a timeline, just to share. This slide shows a timeline. We've shared this slide several times, or variations of this slide. The procedures that would need to take place if we were to put a levy on the November 2024 ballot. Essentially, a decision must be made by the Board of Education prior to August. We actually have a couple of days, maybe in August, to make that decision. So we are making those, we're thinking through that process, going through conversations, obviously, with the board, and yet to make that decision as we move forward.
So one of the questions that Mr. Westney and myself and the board members have heard since the most recent failure in March, and really even before we went on the ballot in March, was why don't we consider an income tax? And so we have been more or less studying an income tax versus a property tax, and we've talked about these at the board meetings. So just to kind of explain some of the differences, with a property tax is paid by all property owners in the district. So that's businesses, it's the homeowners, it's everyone who owns a piece of property. An income tax is paid only by the residents of the school district. It does not include, there's no revenue from the businesses with an income tax. So I think that that's an important consideration. There's also the difference for an income tax. There's earned income tax versus traditional income tax. There's two different ways that tax can work. And earned income tax is really, you basically have to get a W-2. You have to be employed and be receiving income from employment. A traditional income tax is additional kinds of income like pension systems and retirements and that nature. So the more narrow you get that scope on an income tax, you've already eliminated business income. If you go with the earned income tax, you're also reducing tax from people who are receiving retirement income. So you're really narrowing the pool of people who are paying the tax. And so just to explain, some of the differences. The property tax is handled through the county auditor. We're all familiar with that. You get your tax bill in January and again in July, or it's handled through your mortgage escrow. And income tax is different. It's just like filing your state income taxes. There would be an additional state tax return that you would have to file with the state of Ohio. With an income tax, your employer would deduct that from you. So again, if you're a resident, you would pay the income tax. So it doesn't matter where you work. If you work in Kettering or if you work in Cincinnati or Columbus, you have to pay the income tax, and that's usually deducted from your employer, or you handle it through the income tax process. So just to explain to you a little bit of the differences between those two. So we tried to put together, it's very difficult to compare the costs because they're very different taxes. Obviously, one on property and one on income. And so if you look just at that very top line, a home valued at $250,000 with a 3.9 mil levy, because that's what we had on the ballot in March, would be paying $341 in additional property taxes had that levy passed in March, okay? To generate $341 from a 0.5% earned income tax, if a person makes $68,250, they would be paying $341 in income tax, which would be the same. Anything above that, so if a person who lives in that $250,000 home makes $80,000, they're paying more income tax than what they would have had the property tax passed instead. So these are the considerations and things that we're discussing and talking about as we talk to the board and try to educate people about property tax versus an income tax. And I've got other examples there. Obviously, the higher the value home, the more that property tax would have cost, which means a higher income to generate that same amount of income tax. So we did a little bit of modeling with the board in the month of June, levy modeling. We went ahead and we modeled the the 3.9 mil property tax in November. And the numbers are small. I don't expect you to read the numbers. We're not in a whole lot of a different position than where we were in March because we're within the same calendar year. So we would collect that revenue starting in January of 2025. And with the reductions that we've made and with the negotiations being settled, we get out of deficit spending for about 3 years, which is what we try to do when we pass new money. And then we would eventually, down the road, it's that levy cycle. We didn't include that graph here in this presentation because we've seen it so much. But that typical levy cycle is every 4 to 6 years. And so the 3.9 mil would set us up to be in a financial position that we would typically be looking for. We also modeled the same 3.9 mils if we waited until May of 2025. That does get us out of deficit spending, but only for about a year, maybe for 2 in there. The numbers, you get further out by waiting until 2025. So it's a little difficult to be exact on that, but if we wait until May of 25, we're delaying the collection for an additional year. If we wait until 2025, we won't collect any revenue until January of 2026. So that's the big difference there. And so again, with the board, because we were trying to just give them different examples, we feel that if we wait until 2025 to ask for the additional money, that millage amount would probably need to be increased a little bit from the 3.9 mils. And so we modeled for them, again, at the June board meeting, a 4.9 mil property tax levy that would have us in about the same place as if we did 3.9 in November. And so those are just some of the conversations that we've been having with the board.
So again, looking at how to get information from the district, I think we do a really good job of trying to provide as much factual information as we possibly can. This section just highlights how the community members can get more information about our district finances. We want our community to be as informed, give you as much information as possible so that you are informed. You have a page on the district website dedicated strictly to the levy. You can go to that page and actually type in your question, and it'll bring up some of the information and questions in our frequently asked section of the levy page. Upcoming community meetings, we felt like this meeting is important to be able to share some of the information. We also wanted to look at some different types of meetings with our community members moving forward. We will repeat this meeting next Tuesday, July 16th. It'll actually be at Central High School, at Central Theater at the high school. And then we have 6 community chats scheduled. We've been calling those community chats Elks Connection, just an opportunity to be able to meet with me as the superintendent, maybe one of our central office folks, just to have some informal conversations. And those will actually start tomorrow. We have our first one at Welland Elementary at 5 o'clock on Thursday, and then another one in the morning at John Hall Elementary for this week. And so those will continue next week, and we plan to continue those throughout the following year. We get this question a lot. Where are our state representatives? So we provide you the information. Their contact information is here. I will tell you they were invited to this meeting. We make sure that they get an invitation, and we want them to be able to hear some of the information that we're talking about, so that they're aware of our concerns, where we are as a district, and what's the state looking to do to help us and school districts like us as we move forward.